the other thing that I found interesting is that once you start getting too many properties, so for example, if you
Mhm.
start investing in properties
Yeah, yeah.
rather than stocks or bonds, that you'd end up finding that the banks would not want to lend to you, or that they would lend to you with higher and higher interest rates. Could you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, investors are like the professional investors, if you would, that want to build large, portfolios of real estate, are quite the breed because they're really great at like analyzing the asset they're going to buy, the cash flow. They're making sure that the demographics make sense with their objective, the vacancy rates. They are super on top of everything. But when you ask them, well, about the lending, they just assume that every lender is going to lend the same way.
Mhm.
And that's so far from the truth. If you want to build a portfolio of for real estate, and you're going to obviously have to leverage that real estate, you need to know which lenders lend best at what time. There's lenders in our market that will only lend to you on your first two properties. That means if you own more than two properties, they won't lend to you. There's lenders that have global limits. So you have four properties and their global limit is four. Guess what? You got zero mortgages with them and they still won't lend to you.
Mhm.
But there are other lenders that are very easy to work with. And they're like, hey, you can have 50 properties. If they cash flow and their debt coverage ratio is within their guidelines, we will keep lending to you another 5 or 10. So when you're looking at that landscape, you want to use the most restrictive lenders really early in your process. If your goal is to have more than possibly 10 properties and you want to have that available to you in the future, you want to start with those lenders. You need to know when to refinance those properties so you can access the capital to keep you on your journey. And then you go to the second tranche of those lenders that are, that 4 global door policy or 5 global door policy. And then you go to those less restrictive lenders, which is only like really one right now in Canada that stands out as a total DCR debt coverage ratio lender on a portfolio of any size. You want to save them for the end. So this way you have a ton of bandwidth you can grow. Look, and not to like, I understand that the banks, like, they're selling their product and they're never really telling customers how it is that they're lending. They don't tell them the rules and the regulations. They don't tell them about the lenders' limitations with their policies and procedures as to how they're going to lend. They don't explain to you how credit is underwritten, you know. And I think there's two. I think there's one, not everybody really understands it, and B, there's no advantage and it's pretty complicated, so there's no point in having this conversation. So what they'll do is they'll keep lending to you and they'll get as many exceptions as they can until they hit a wall. And we did a lot of consulting over the years and speaking at real estate forums with investors, like 700 investors in the room. And at the end, when you come off the stage, there's tons of them lining up to say, I hit that wall.
Yeah.
And nobody told me it was coming. So at Vine, we actually have a blueprint. We call it the blueprint. And basically what it is we analyze every single lender within our ecosystem, all their policies, and we put it together like a puzzle. And we know which lenders we want to start the journey with because they're great to deal with and they're going to have favorable terms, but they're going to be really difficult down the road. And we know which lenders we want to leave to the end of the journey. And then when you get to the end of the journey of residential lending and you've kind of exhausted all the lenders, we have a structure in place where we can take an entire residential portfolio, put it into a commercial blanket loan, and start the journey all over again on the rest side.